That says I'm not able to share screen.
Oh, let me make sure you're as the co-host. And Adrian, I'll make sure you're co-host so that you're good to go. And then you'll have the ability.
Okay, there we go. I'll wait till share till we bring everyone in, but
we are here. Thanks, Nick.
And this is the Gold Star crew.
I know, right? I am so proud to see people still here. Awesome. Or if you just joined for this one, welcome. There's 3 recordings. Forrest, do you want me to give it another minute?
Yeah, we can give it a moment. Just give folks a chance to come on back in case they were taking a little bit of a bio break.
Or in my case, a puppy break, right? I got 3 dogs that are old, but like insist on going out. What they're thinking about that. There's 2.
Oh, there's 2, and I've kept trying to change it, but it doesn't always want to. It doesn't want to respect my change in my edit. So I get enough mistypings. I'm used to it at this point. All right. So just as a reminder, folks, if you have questions, feel free to either drop them in the chat or make use of the Q&A. Adrian and I will be kind of tag teaming on this presentation, but we have some other colleagues here. They're going to be happy to help and jump in on that Q&A as well. So,
all right, everybody, welcome to session 4. If you hung in there for all of them, we're super excited. If this is your first one, there are 3 more in the can, as we like to say with links. So this is about the rapidly changing landscape, and I'm going to introduce our hosts for this session. So Dr. Forrest Helvey. Forrest is the Interim Director of Professional Development for Connecticut State Community College. Prior to this role, he was a longtime faculty member in Connecticut's community college system. Recently, he's been traveling around a number of campuses at CT State to answer questions and give guidance to faculty and staff about the use of AI in and outside the classroom. Joining Forrest is Adrian Dunham. Adrian is the Interim Director of Educational Technology and Curriculum Innovation at the Connecticut State Community College and formerly the Director of Education Technology at Tunxus Community College, where she has been employed since 1998. In this role, she is responsible for leading the instructional design process for CT State by facilitating technology-rich teaching and learning through collaborative curricular innovation to ensure service, reliability, and consistency. Thank you.
So we are going to get started today, looking at the future landscape and really thinking again about, what are the implications for all of us, here in CSCU, whether we're faculty, whether we're staff, management, what does this look like for us? So before we get started, we're going to ask just to kind of do a temperature check in the room, and you can use the reaction buttons to let us know kind of where you're falling on this, spectrum right now. So if you're excited about AI, if this is something you're looking forward to trying or you've been enjoying kind of working out with, thumbs up excited. If you don't know how to feel, if you're kind of all over the place, use that like laughing, crying kind of, or if you're scared or anxious, maybe put the shocked face in there. So I'm seeing a couple thumbs up, a couple shocked. I'm seeing a lot of the laughing, crying, mixed emotions. So Adrian, from what I'm seeing, looks like we've kind of got a little bit of everybody in our afternoon session here.
Yeah, we sure
look
do.
about right to you?
Sounds about right. And I think it echoes what we all feel. I think we're on the sort of trying to embrace this side of things and excited. But we certainly know that there things that will make us anxious along the way.
Exactly. So for fun, and this is a recap, if you've been with any of the other sessions today, you've heard a little bit about what AI is. I want to have a little fun with it. Adrian want to have fun with it. So we asked ChatGPT effectively, what are you? And what was interesting is that everything below that line was created. So it even gave itself a nice little subtitle. It's Unleashing Creative Machines. But this entire paragraph summary was written by ChatGPT. And by and large, aside from cutting a more positive, forward-thinking view of itself, it does give a pretty good overview as to what these large language-based models are and how they can be used, not just with language-based, generative product, but also, as we're seeing some of the more problematic or gray areas with art, with design, and content creation. And really thinking about the ethical considerations. So I guess I got to give at least some credit to ChatGPT. It recognized there are ethical considerations that it is bringing about along with other AI.
And again, this is a list of some of the various tools that many of our panelists have already spoken about today, just classified into sort of different categories. We have just sort of the overall generative AI category, and we've talked about Google's application, which is called Bard, ChatGPT, Claude, Bing's AI application. For art, we have Crayon, we have DALL-E, we have Deep AI. For math, we see Mathway as one of the leaders and Wolfram Alpha. We have some scientific research tools, Consensus, Elicit, and Cite. And we have some audio and video tools, 11 Labs, Flicky, Runway, and if I can say this right, Synthesia. And Forrest will certainly talk more about some of these, and I will as well.
And just as an aside, I do want to point out for those of you in CT State that this information will be shared in our upcoming Professional Learner newsletter. But for everybody out there, these slide decks from the first one in the morning all the way up to ours today in the afternoon will be shared out. So please don't worry about having to quickly rush and copy everything down. We'll be providing access to this shortly, okay? Because we want to make sure you have access to these, you can play around with them. And just as another aside, in terms of like information and privacy, we know that that's a question, and we'll talk about some of the concerns that this technology brings up. Most of these will require some level of information to be shared, as much as like a Google email account. One that I know that does not have any requirement for sharing of information, which I'll be demonstrating momentarily, is Bing AI. So that is a language model that you can use that does not require you to give an email address, name, anything at all. So if that's an area of concern for you, just to kind of put that on your radar.
And some of these are free and some of them have paid components. So, it really, I think, depends on what you're looking for, how you're looking to implement these things or integrate them either in the classroom or in your everyday work life.
Right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of shift gears because, again, we're going to lean a little bit on the work that our colleagues earlier today did in describing a lot of this and introducing what are these models. And we wanted to dive into a couple different demonstrations. If we're thinking about that shifting of the landscape, how can some of this software be utilized in a way that can help us with the work that we're doing? With those caveats in mind that there are concerns that we can't just have an application do this and then walk away. This is not a set it and forget it operation by any means, but there are ways that can help expedite some of the work we're doing so that we can focus on some of those larger tasks we're handling. So the first one we're going to look at is a prompt, and I'm going to shift gears on screens in just a moment, and we're going to analyze the following data set and identify the 5 most common trends or themes from the responses to the question of what is the greatest obstacle you faced in your first year of employment, and then list the total number of responses associated with that category. Now, to give you a little bit of context, earlier this spring, the Office of Teaching and Learning for CT State put out a survey to all faculty, staff, and managers who had been hired since fall of 2019. So we were trying to get some information from recent hires at all levels and backgrounds to try to get a feel for what was their onboarding orientation process like. And so there were a lot of different questions that were involved. And so what I did is grabbed some information here and see if, how can I better kind of collate this information that I've gathered, And so I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'm going to shift over to my browser just for a moment. Because what I'd like to show you really quickly here is that if you look at Microsoft Forms, it does certain things really nicely for us, right? So, I had, this is a professional development one, excuse me. I got to shift over to the correct form. Thought I had that open. Oh, what happened? There we go. Sorry, I was just having a little bit of a blip there. So if I go to onboarding and orientation, this is the form, and I had 151 responses. And so if I want to know if they fit within this window, if I'm curious about which of the 12 campuses they aligned with, or if they were aligned in CT State or CSU as a whole. Quantitative information forms does a really good job of cranking this out for me and giving me a nice visual that I can share that people can look at and kind of process very readily. Where it gets dicey is when you get to those text-based answers, which is why if you're doing a survey, you don't want to have too many of those because trying to process that is really difficult, especially when you start to get to 151 different responses, right? And so here there's 26. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you what it could look like if we were to go ahead and try to process some of this information, the qualitative data from this survey through one of these chat AI applications. So this is Bing. So I want to actually show you exactly how to get there. Bing might not be your browser of choice, and that's okay. A lot of people like Google Chrome or Firefox. But if you go directly to the Bing browser, you can click on chat. And then you get to this text box. You can ask for more creative responses, more balanced. You can select more precise. If I'm doing something like this, I wanted it to be as precise as possible. What I did, just to kind of speed things along, that survey that I showed you, that had many, many questions attached to it. So this Excel document, I cut it down just to the ID number, which just means what number in line were you of the 151? This person was number 77. I included their primary function, so full-time, part-time faculty, staff, gender, ethnicity, and then the answer to the question that I'm curious about. So I included this information in case I want to disaggregate the data to understand whether or not, certain groups of our colleagues are having more or less experience with onboarding, or in this case, the obstacle that they faced. So are there certain groups that are experiencing certain obstacles more than others? So that's good information for us to have. But what I also want to point out here is that there's actually no personal identifying information. So you don't know who responded in which way. And that's really important. Other presenters today have said this, and we'll repeat it. You really want to avoid putting personal identifying information into these generators, just as a matter of privacy, best practices, and pertaining to students, then you get into FERPA-related challenges. So you want to make sure you avoid that. So what I would do is I'm going to go ahead and copy that prompt, okay? Excuse me. And I'm going to stop the screen share because I'm going to be a little, easy on myself and I don't have to type the whole thing out. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just going to be copying and pasting that first prompt. And then I'll go back into a share because I want you to see how this works. All right, back into screen share, go back into showing you the browser. All right, and we can see that okay again. So what I did is I copied the prompt, as you can see right here. And then what I'm going to do, there is a character limit, just to be clear. And you can have it analyze larger data sets, but you have to do it in chunks. And I'm going to show you how you can do that. When you think about how this could work for you, I'm using this for how do I process qualitative responses to this orientation onboarding survey. But if you're faculty, maybe you're teaching 3 or 4 sections of a particular course and you're kind of doing that midterm assessment to just check in with the students. How are you doing? What are the challenges you're facing in this class? I know a lot of us do that. But how do you pick out the themes and trends aside from reading every single individual one? And spoiler, it is good to read all of them. But again, you know, as you're reading it and processing it, you have to sometimes kind of go back and then know, what do these all have in common? So what I'm going to do is I'll copy and paste those data lines through. And so usually about 30 entries that I can go ahead and copy. So I just copy it from the spreadsheet and I'm going to paste it right below. Everyone see that okay? A good spoiler check is just check that last entry line to make sure that it's complete. So that way, you know, you didn't inadvertently put half a data point in there. So that's one of the things you look at. And then just hit return. And now you can watch Bing start to process this data request that I just gave it. You'll also note it gives me the theme, gives me a quick little summary point around it, and it tells me how many responses are associated with that specific theme that it identified. Now, keep in mind, I've only put in 30 total entries. So what I'm going to do is I'll go back in and you'll notice, and I'm going to do another share because I want to switch gears and I want you to see the second prompt was a little bit different. And I would use this same prompt as many times as I need just to go ahead and get all my data accounted for. So you'll see it says review the following data set using the previous guidance and combine them. Oh, typo there, catch that. Although I will tell you, it's pretty good about reading through your typos. So that's a nice thing. And combine this set of results with the previous results, adjusting the categories if necessary, which it will be. So this way I can start to develop cumulative results from this full survey. And so I'll go back in and I will add, say just for today's purposes, I'm just going to go and add another 30 responses and we'll stop there. So I've copied it and now I'm going to paste it in. Now you'll notice what I said before, check for those partially completed entries. I was hoping to get to 60. It didn't quite do it because there were a couple responses that were a little more wordy. So I'll just delete number 52 and recognize that that's where I would have to pick up later if I was going to continue to really analyze this full set of responses for this question. And again, you can see that it's starting to process and it's readjusting. You'll notice it's increasing the number of responses in some cases. So is this perfect? It's not. We've heard this a number of times. We still have to continue to proof that workout, right? So I might say, well, if I'm going to do some math here, so well, that's 2, that's 4, that's 7, that's 11, that's 20. And I might ask it, how many total responses did you analyze and how many were not accounted for within these 5 categories so that I can try to identify, were the others all just kind of like single instances or was there a mistake? In some cases, you're going to find that it will double down and kind of like, no, I did this right. But other times you can find it. So now this tells me there's 8 that weren't, and there's 28 total responses. Okay, that adds up. And I'll still want to read through all these responses, but this does at least give me something to start with. I look at when I'm going ahead and collecting mass amounts of information. When I conducted the professional learning needs assessment for CT State last fall, I had over 409 different responses. And a number of those were text-based. It's really hard to try to capture the largest issues coming out of that. I still read through all of them individually, but this gives me at least a starting point for how I can start to categorize things and pick things out. But again, emphasizing the need to continue to proof that work is there, but how much time can be saved that way. So I think that that's at least one example that, you know, I wanted to just take a few minutes just to kind of show you to see what that looks like in practice. All right. So now I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint, just kind of get us back on here. There we go. And now we're going to look at a team presentation. So one of the other things I was looking at was there are times where we have presentations we have to do. We're sitting in a committee and we got voluntold that, hey, I need you to go ahead and, you know, lead the discussion on this next week. And so a lot of us know what right looks like. We know what we're supposed to cover, but sometimes we just, whether we're busy because we're grading a million papers and we've got to get them back to students, so there's that time crunch, or we're fried, or our kids are driving us nuts, and we just sometimes just overlook something that we already know. That's, again, where I think that this can be helpful. So, and I also wanted to show you ways that you can revise it so that you can get better answers. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to go over to Google Bard now, and we're going to give it this first prompt, and then I'm going to show you what that looks like in practice. And we'll shift back over to, you know, prompt number 2. So in this case, we're going to pretend that we are the chair of a computer science department, and that's going to be running, you know, beginning of the year department meeting. And we're just going to kind of put together a PowerPoint presentation that's going to help orient new and part-time faculty to the department, as well as the campus as a whole. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to go ahead and copy that initial prompt, and I'm going to drop that into Google Bard. And then we're just going to see what does Google Bard come up with. And, you know, what's kind of fun is Adrian and I were working on this, and we kind of test piloted these to see what they would look like. And it came up with one set of answers. And I went back in and test piloted it again earlier today just to see how things were working. And I got another whole set of answers. So you do get different responses depending on, you know, where you are on that day. So in the interests of being fair, you know, I had that open, but you can just go right to your search bar and click in Bard. And for me, it's going to automatically pull it up, or you can just click in Google Bard and it'll pull you right there. Okay. So there's nothing complicated to get to this particular point. But again, you'll notice I do have my personal, you know, Google account that I'm using here. So there's the entry, and I'm going to go ahead and drop it in here. And let's see what it says. Oh, it did not do the copy for me. Let me try that one more time. There we go. Take 2. Oh, it still doesn't want to do that text. Well, give me 1 second and I can do a very quick workaround. It may be having a problem with taking the text from one into the other, and it's not pasting as a regular text. There we go. There it is. Everyone see that okay? All right, so it's generating a response to me. I see some thumbs up. Good, I'm glad it worked. That's the fun part of playing around with some of this, is like, it's going to be a little messy. It's going to be a little weird to work out. But it's also kind of nice in a way because, you know, I think about the experience my students have in the classroom. It kind of puts me back in that space as a learner. So it's kind of good to remind me of what learning feels like. So here's kind of the outline that it gives you. So this is an overview, and there's a lot of information here. And I might just say, you know what, this doesn't put it in a slide format. So I'm going to say, please put this into the format by slide. Let's see if it does a little different for me, because I want to know what goes on slide 1, what goes on slide 2. And there we go. So it makes that immediate change for me. And it gives me a total of 6, 7 slides, provides some good content. I'm still going to have to fill in a lot of this myself, but it gives me an overview, and I can think about, well, what's here that I want to include? What's missing? But if I have a lot of this initial kind of standard boilerplate created for me, I can look at that and fine tune it so that it meets my specific needs for my specific science department. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can really drill down deep. And I've shown you briefly the second prompt. So I'm going to go ahead and get that pulled up for you. I'm just going to do that little text piece so that way we don't have the same hiccup as before. All right, and here comes the second prompt with much greater detail. All right, you can kind of see the basic prompt that I gave the first time through, but maybe there were elements that I found were missing. I'm like, oh, I want this to flesh out even further. So now I'm touching into introduction to the department, its history, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, introduction to the campus, duties of the faculty member, semester duties, resources available. And now I'm going to see what it says. And again, you put in a little bit more text, it's going to potentially take a little bit longer to process, but here we go. Consider how long this would have taken you to crank all of this out on your own without the support. Again, gives you a nice big breakdown. And of course, again, you still have to proof all of what it generates for you because like, oh, well, that's not really relevant. Or some of it may not be exact. So you can't take away that human component. The intent, though, is that it can take away some of that initial work that you have to do to get that first draft off onto the table so that you can start the fine-tuning process. Okay? So I hope this gives you at least a little bit of an idea in terms of how you can use some of the more standard, more commonly found applications for some of the work that all of us do, whether we're faculty or staff. But I know Adrian's got a couple that she wants to walk you through as well that I think you're going to find to be helpful too. So let me pull the share up and we will continue forward.
Thank you. And before we do continue, there is a question in the Q&A that I thought might be useful to just address now before we move on.
Mhm.
It noted that it was a great data example. They heard you say that data was pulled from Excel. Can the same thing be done pulling words from a Word document, trying to figure out how to collect data from discussion posts?
Yeah. What's really cool is it's just the magic of the copy and paste, right? But again, like I showed, you saw that happened where, it only copied so many of the different responses that I had. So you do want to check to see how much did you copy, how much actually pasted. You may have to go back and say, hey, please take into account the following responses and add them to the previous set of results. So that way you can kind of build. And that's how I've used it so that I could process, some of the responses of over 400 different answers. But yes, you can absolutely use Word. You can copy it from, even if you're going into Blackboard and you're looking at some of the discussions, you can ask it to, copy and paste the responses from students and post that in. Again, making sure that identifying student information is not included. So yeah, you can absolutely use different platforms for being able to process that information. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Forrest. All right. So moving right along, this is going to be sort of a hands-on application here. And I'm going to speak to both faculty and to staff. So in this first example, this is more of a faculty-based example where this might be useful in your, maybe not every day, but at least at the beginning of your semester practices, as we think about all of the things that we suggest in terms of a best practice. And those of us that are familiar with the backward design process, we start with the end in mind. So we start with those objectives, and then we identify how our students can meet those objectives, and then we create the content that sort of assesses meeting those objectives and to what level. So we are going to pretend that we already have the course objectives defined for us, but maybe we need to now identify objectives that are specific to an assignment. So we're going to pretend that we're marketing 101, and our prompt for any AI application is to generate 5 to 7 assignment objectives for a collaborative marketing course assignment that align with the following course objective. And so the one course objective that we're focusing on for this assignment is to create a value-driven marketing strategy. And then I included some additional details about the assignment itself. May or may not be useful to the AI application that we use, but it certainly will help us produce different results. So if you bear with me one moment, I am going to share my screen. That's going to force Forest to sort of close. And hopefully I am sharing my screen successfully. So here is my prompt. I copied and pasted that prompt right into Google's Bard. And this is what it produced for us. It says, sure, here are 5 to 7 assignment objectives for a collaborative marketing course assignment that align with the following course objectives. And the objective is listed down here, creating value-driven marketing strategy. But you can see objective number 1 is to understand the client's brand and target market. In this objective, students will research the client's brand and target market and identify their wants and needs. Objective 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it gave us 5, and then it also sort of gave us an explanation as to why it produced those results. It says these objectives are aligned with the course objective because they require students to understand the client's needs, develop a creative and effective marketing campaign, and measure the results of the campaign. By completing this assignment, students will gain value skills in marketing research, strategy development, campaign creation, and measurement. And then it gives us some additional objectives as well. Now, switching over to Claude, and I'm going to assume that you can see my screen still. Is that correct?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. I put that same prompt in, right? Nope, sorry. My apologies. Not the correct one. There we go. Put the same prompt in, generate 5 to 7 assignment objectives for collaborative marketing course. And this is what Claude gave me. So Claude was a little bit more brief. Bard gave me a little bit more. But that's not to say that one is more correct than the other. Of course, we'd have to be the ones to look at this and determine if those are actually aligning with our course objectives. So I certainly don't think this will replace us. I think it will aid us. And we from here can certainly improve these prompts, right? That's, I think, what we're talking about today is how do we go about using these tools effectively in either our teaching or our everyday work. And so having said that, I'll stop right here for a moment and just give you a moment to type into the chat some ways that you think we can improve this prompt.
Any suggestions on improving the prompt that you might want to see tried?
Thank you, Wallen. I'll just note
No
that
worries.
brain is fried. I understand completely. Prioritize them. Yes, we can certainly prioritize some of the objectives that were output. Value-driven marketing strategy is somewhat vague, right? So we can use these sorts of things after reading what it outputs to either clarify or improve our prompt. And for those of you that attended some of our earlier sessions, Dave gave great example of teenagers, if you ask a teenager to clean their room, you might not get the desired result, right? You have to be a little more specific. So clean your room, pick up the clothes, throw away any garbage you might have. And so the results will essentially be better as you improve these prompts. And so I will ask, I will demonstrate one more example, and that is more towards the line of our staff. This could certainly be applicable in many different roles, but for staff, oftentimes we get stuck wanting to promote something or perhaps send an email. Maybe we're running a session like we are today, and we want to market that session. So a prompt we might use is to draft a 2 to 3 paragraph email marketing a workshop available to faculty and staff, focusing on the use of AI in their everyday job responsibilities. And we want to be sure to include the definition of AI and highlight the link to register. So as an example of that, you can see I popped in that prompt into Bard, draft a 2 to 3 paragraph email, and Bard provided me with this lovely email. Hi, everyone. Artificial intelligence is rapidly changing the world, and it's no exception for the workplace. AI is already being used in a variety of ways to automate tasks, improve efficiency, and make better decisions. If you're interested in learning more about how AI can impact your everyday job responsibilities, I encourage you to register for the upcoming AI workshop for faculty and staff. In this workshop, you'll learn XYZ. It will be led by Jane Doe. The workshop will be held on Tuesday, August 23rd at 10 a.m. in the library. Registration is free, but space is limited. Now, you'll see that Bard output that without any of those details. So it's my job to look at this and, is my workshop really on August 23rd from 10 to 12? Maybe, maybe not. Is it being held in the library? Is registration free? Is space limited? So I need to include those details. Those are some details that I certainly might include in the prompt. If I neglected to do so in the first round, I can certainly go back. And you'll notice I went back and I said, include an image of a computer classroom. So it provided me with an image, gives me a description of the image. And so I can decide from there if I want to copy and paste this into an email to market this workshop more effectively, what details I need to include. And certainly some things we might want to consider are, like I said, the actual date and time, the location, the amount of seats available, provide an actual URL for the registration. So I didn't include that. There was a space for it to be included. So when I copy and paste that text and I put it into an actual email, I can include that, or I can give that as part of the prompt in whatever AI application I'm using. Are there any other considerations that we might be forgetting? I'm sure there's lots, but that's what this is about, right? It's about popping something in, seeing what it produces, and then trying to improve it. So anybody have any thoughts on any ideas that we could improve this particular prompt? Yeah, so that's a good question. Does giving the large language model a persona give a better output? And I think so. It depends on certainly what we do, right? If I used one of these AI generators and I'm using Cran is specific to sort of art. So you can choose whether or not you want to use art, a drawing, a photo, or none. I can say, art, and I can say, illustration of a computer. This isn't necessarily giving it a persona, but it certainly would. If I could spell, that would be fabulous. Illustration. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to hit draw and you'll see what it outputs. But yes, certainly giving something a persona, or in one of our earlier sessions, you know, telling it specifically what type of demographic, region, etc. you want to have it output, whether it's text, whether it's an image, whether it's a voice. That all certainly helps with the output. Did I actually hit draw? Sometimes I think I do. So the results certainly vary. And I'm looking at the questions too as they come in to try to answer some of these. You know, black screen at the moment.
You know, we did get a message that came through, you know, and from Elizabeth in terms of, you know, this shows how well it can put together ideas and write them, and it can be kind of scary for English professors. I would say anybody that's incorporating, you know, writing to learn activities in their classes, not even just English. But I do think, you know, this comes into this space of, you know, frequently you're going to find that there are hallucinations and that there are inaccuracies, and it will double down on it. I was putting together some workshops that are going to take place in just a couple of weeks, and I just said, hey, give me some ideas on like what's out there right now. I'm kind of curious, and simultaneously trying to play around with, you know, the AI for today. And I said, now check these sources for me. None of the 4 sources that ChatGPT offered existed. And so, you know, one of the previous presenters, Holly, she had talked about, you know, and they'll double down on this. And so they're going to be, you know, adamant in their hallucination and basically the bad data that they're giving you. And so our students at some point, if they're getting, you know, caught on bad data and bad, you know, responses and invalid or unreal sources, you know, that can be a discouragement for you. So I'm not saying it's going to solve your problems, but that whole notion of, you know, it is not as reliable as we may think it is. It may not be as reliable as it makes itself seem. And so earlier participant said, like, this really speaks to the need for liberal arts studies and the, you know, the critical thinking, the critical questioning, the critical reading that liberal arts brings to the table is the best way to navigate, you know, this AI piece that we're all kind of grappling with right now. So did want to make sure I get to that, but back to you, Adrienne. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so you can see it took probably a minute or so to render this illustration. It was a fairly simple request, right? An illustration of a computer. It wasn't too detailed. I could have said, you know, an illustration of a computer with a mouse and 2 monitors. And, you know, I could have given it those specific details, but I didn't. And this is what it produced. So, you know, we've talked previously about sort of what to look for in these outputs. Does this belong to us because we requested this? Does it belong to the AI generator? Who does this belong to? We could have said, you know, an illustration of a computer using a particular artist's style as a prompt, and so we could get different results. And so yes, I think, you know, if we target the audience, we're going to get a different result. If we say, you know, coming from the voice of, we're going to get different results. And so I think, you know, the possibilities are sort of vast. More fact checking. Absolutely. Yes. Yep. And so if we wanted to use your example, Elizabeth, during the question session at noon, you know, we can pop something in. We're going to start a new chat. Let's generate a sentence. If I could spell, I cannot spell. Apparently, I need some assistance with that myself. Generate a sentence. Give me a good example, Elizabeth. What would you like to see in this sentence that it generates? I'll give you a minute to type it in. We could use different components of the sentence. We could use a specific topic that states a clear side of an argument. All right. Here's a sentence stating the clear side of an argument. The evidence is unequivocal that action must be taken now or to address climate change. Explaining the new movie Oppenheimer with a picture of. I'm not going to type that into anything in my browser just because. Just because that last word. When you say from the perspective of an English faculty member, what determines the identity of that persona? Isn't there some bias? Absolutely bias. And so that, I think, sort of propels us into some of the challenges with AI, right? Let me stop sharing for a moment. I'll let Forrest share his screen, and we'll get back to the PowerPoint, and we will wrap it up with some of the challenges and biases that we've seen. You're on mute.
It would be great if I would not do the mute thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a great, point about, you can ask for perspective, you can ask for to review an audience, but what constitutes that audience? Who is in that audience? What does it mean to be, a first-year student? Because we all know, in particularly Connecticut, who our first-year students are incredibly varied, and they come from all kinds of backgrounds. And so this is pulling off of whatever's out there in the internet. We all know the internet has its issues, and it is full of all sorts of misinformation. So that's why it's always, something that we want to be really looking at with a number of grains of salt, right? So we want to be careful about the accuracy of the information we get. I was at a conference this past March, and the president of MADICON had not MADICON, excuse me, but AMADIC, the Association of Math for Two-Year Colleges. And she had a really interesting way that she's utilizing AI, knowing that it may not always be accurate, but then to give students, the answers. This is the formula. Here's the answer that AI produced. Working backwards, show the work and determine whether or not it produced a precise, accurate, response. So that was an interesting way to kind of address that accuracy and precision issue, but knowing that maybe the number it tallies isn't exactly correct. So you still need to prove that work. Like we were saying, the issue of bias. There's a lot of issues with who was programming and creating these programs, who created a lot of, that information going back 10, 20 years. And so who does it tend to privilege? These are issues that we have to be aware of in terms of the amount of bias that's baked into the internet, and these large language models and these animation pieces, never mind copyright issues, that's what they're drawing from. So there's a lot of questions there. You're going to notice that we have FERPA and privacy split separately. And that's strictly because, when Adrian and I were talking about this, like FERPA is really focusing on our students. So when it comes to student work, making absolutely sure that anything we put in there does not violate student information. So, sometimes, we have the idea of, tell the story, not the specifics. Same kind of idea here. Don't give any specific information that's identifying for your students. Otherwise, it's violating FERPA. And in the same fashion, looking at even privacy, showing professional privacy guidelines, and don't be sharing information about colleagues. Well, I have all these employees I have all these candidates for a job. I'm going to just put in all their CVs and see which one the AI thinks is the best choice. That's sharing personal information. You really need to be mindful about how you use this. And then the other piece that's just a matter of practicality. right? The chat GPT that's available to all of us right now, that is current as of 2021. And so we're already 2 years past its information. So anything that thing gives us is going to be 2 years outdated. When we think about some of the detection software that's out there, that detection software is predicated on previous iterations of the software that currently exists. So, Zero GPT, the massive language learning model software detection, those are all already outdated because they can't keep up. They're reactive software. So just recognizing the inherent flaw and the outdatedness that exists there as well. So just something to be thinking about as we're looking at AI, and how are we sharing this with our students so that they can recognize this isn't like the genie in a bottle for them as it pertains to just getting work done quickly. But it's a tool that has some uses, but it's very careful about how we go about implementing it within our respective classes. And we touched a little bit about this there as well, with detecting AI. These are some of the ones that you can use. But again, I think Adrian and I are both a little reticent to, full-throatedly endorse them because there are issues with, as we mentioned, how it's doing. So it's basing its detection off of old iterations of the software, and their accuracy is not correct. I can tell you there were a number of different documents that I test piloted that were more than 95% AI generated. I did a couple tweaks to the sentence structure and I got a 0% AI rating from GPT-0, which is often one of the most popular ones. Their other issue to look at, and we've included some links here, there's a lot of bias baked into this, and these detectors can inadvertently end up penalizing some students that are actually writing the work all on their own. And so, is that reinforcing some of the education gaps that we're experiencing in the classroom if students are being accused of, using AI when they did not? So we do want to be very cautious about the use of AI detection software, as we're moving forward into the year ahead. And that's the formal part of our kind of, we'll call it presentation demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. I do want to reiterate all of this all of these slides and the information herein are going to be included, and available to everyone across CSCU. So just kind of keep an eye out, whether through your respective Centers for Education, Teaching, and Learning, or if, through the Office of Teaching and Learning through CT State, we'll be sending this out for everybody. But I do see we have one person's hand up, and I just want to make sure we give you an opportunity. Anne Marie, go ahead and you can unmute and ask your question. Did you get a chance to unmute? All right, well, we're waiting for Anne Marie. Were there any other questions that we didn't get to in the Q&A? Okay, so from Valerie, is there a current protocol for referencing in the style of for student work? So in terms of providing a prompt, the language of the prompt, I think it's just a matter, that's how I've done it is, in the style of, you can try and drill it down to in the style of a student who is a first semester student, traditionally out of high school, ages 18 to 20, you can really drill down as close as you can to that demographic. But again, just recognizing that you're getting effectively a stereotype kind of answer. And so what might there be questions or problems or concerns around that? So just, I do think that that's worth considering. So we have another question. I think we answered this one, but with Mary, with the perspective of an English faculty, and we talked about all the challenges that lie with the baked-in bias. From Elizabeth. So if we don't want to use AI in an assignment, how do we check to make sure it wasn't used? So that's going to be a really difficult challenge. And Liz, I wish I had a good, clean answer for you on this. The reality is it's going to be very difficult to check. But in the same way, I think back to when I first started teaching in an online asynchronous class, I never actually really knew for sure that the student's name who had submitted assignments attached to them was actually that human being, because I've still not met very many of my online students. So I could never really tell you for sure that they actually did the work, or did their older sibling or, friend or somebody else do it. I don't know. That doesn't necessarily make me feel great. And I wish I had a good answer for you on that. One thing I think we can do, though, is, how are we talking about the use of AI for specific assignments in the classroom? Letting them know to say, hey, there's going to be an in-class assessment that we're going to do. It's going to be analog on paper and pencil and paper, and you're not going to have assistive tech to support you with this particular assignment. So if you don't understand these skills, and when you have homework and you do this with AI, you're not going to know how to do this well on that assessment. And so giving them the roadmap for where it's a safe space to use it. A previous presenter, Dave, in his panel talked about ways that the AI could be leveraged as kind of like a, writing support. That could work there. But for this particular assignment, this is a kind of a no AI touch space. And in others, you may say, hey, use it to kind of help you generate some outlines. So I think if we can be real explicit with them, it's not going to dissuade the students who are just dead set on using it. But what it can do is, for a lot of those students who are on the middle road of knowing when and where it's safe, it might move more of them in the direction of doing the assignments in the ways that we know that they need to do. So I hope that helps provide some answer. Not a prompt, but rather students to write in their reference section. I'm not sure what we're asking there. My apologies. And are the generated results archived by the programs? Yes. So, any kind of information that it generates, it helps with the learning process. I apologize, I can't remember the source where I read this. But like, for example, if you have something submitted through Blackboard, then they know that it's a student work, and that can then be checked for future plagiarism. But the problem is, you think about the infinite combinations that these AI generators can create. So that's hard to track in that regard. But in terms of, the information that's shared, that's one of the information security reasons and why we encourage folks strongly. Don't put your personal information in, because it will get into that greater pool for the AI to access. So I don't know if we have any other questions. I know we're kind of scratching up on time. But again, I want to thank everybody for coming today. Appreciate all your questions and engagement. And we're going to be continuing these conversations, around CSCU, because we know that a one-time summit is not going to address all your questions and concerns. We know that the technology is going to continue to grow and develop in new and different ways. So, and if you have feedback, we're going to be sending out a survey to kind of get a read from you in terms of what else can we do to help you? What can we do to support your professional growth and learning? What can we do to help support your work in the classrooms and all around our respective institutions? But I'm going to pass the ball back to Dave to kind of formally close us out for the day.
Yep. As I said, I already started to get the recording links from Zoom, so I'm going to put that together. You will get it by the end of the week. The way we'll probably do is I'll distribute it through your respective provosts and CETL directors and such, to ask them to distribute to everyone over in the college community. But thank you so much for your day. I know we couldn't get to every single question as we go in. Other follow-up questions, let us know, because we're going to want to continue this conversation. I said this is only the start of our journey, and we understand it's going to be an iterative process. As I said, sometimes it's always darkest before dawn. As we iterate and as you start to pilot these things, let's continue those conversations. So I think as we share more amongst each other, a lot of these concerns we're also going to start to alleviate as well. So thank you all for your participation. Good stuff.